Shalom Vayikra, Shabbos Parsha Zachor. We're just now the week before Purim. As we march along, we begin a new Chumash this week. We begin a new Seder Vayikra, where the theme changes drastically from what we've been doing the past couple of months. And this coming week, just a little programming note, obviously Thursday is Purim, unless we'll all be in Yerushalayim, where in that case Purim will be on Friday. But we're thinking of doing the shir maybe on Tuesday night. We'll do a nice Purim shir, but stay tuned for the details. Just want to mention that tonight's shir is being said for a zchus, for Refuah Shalema, for Avraham Chaim ben Chaya, somebody whose family is here at the Bika Cholim house, and they asked that we mention the name at the shir tonight. And in this week's parsha, we begin speaking about the karbonos. And it's not just all the laws, so many different types of karbonos. It's not just the laws of the karbonos, when to bring the karbonos, how to bring the karbonos. That's not all that we study when we speak about the karbonos. There are so many things that come along with the halachas, the dry halachas of what you have to do. There are so many things that come along that we need to learn also, lessons we need to learn about karbonos. And Chazal tell us, the Torah begins in Parshat Vayikra, the Torah tells us, Adam ki akriv mikem karbon lashem. And we see that the Torah specifically does not use the probably more straightforward lashon, which would say Adam mikem, a person amongst you, ki akriv, who would be a carbon. What does it mean to bring Adam ki akriv mikem, where you're bringing from yourself? That it seems the pasuk is telling us that you're bringing from yourself. So Chazal tell us that the reason the Torah writes it that way is that a carbon really is not just about the exterior things that we're doing. It's not just about how we slaughter the carbon, how we spray the dam of the carbon. The carbon should be mikem. The carbon really has to come from within you. When a person wants to do tshuva with the carbon, when a person wants to bring something to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when a person wants to thank Hashem with the carbon, amongst all the other reasons that a person would bring a sacrifice, you have to understand that the carbon has to come from within yourself, where you're actually giving yourself over to Hashem. And that's the idea of a carbon, being close to Hashem and giving yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That it should actually be mikem, where you are giving from yourself. And if you do that and you actually accomplish that, where you're giving yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the pasuk tells us that is an Yishei Reach Nichoyach Lashem. That is what is most pleasant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where He wants to see that you yourself, you're being machnia yourself, you're subjugating yourself, you are giving yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's really the greatest nachas ruach to Hashem. That is what we call a carbon lashem, giving yourself over to Hashem. But let's say a person doesn't do all of that, and he does just like it says in the pasuk. If he gives it min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzoyin, he gives it that way, and you don't actually give yourself over to Hashem, then the pasuk says, takrivu es karbanchem. That's just, you're bringing a carbon. It's for you. It's a beautiful way of reading the pasuk. If you give yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you understand what the point of a carbon is, that's Ishei Reach Nichoyach Lashem. But if you just give the korban, you just bring the animal because the Torah tells you that's the law to bring the animal, and you don't do that extra step of understanding what a korban really should be, then it's takrivu as korban chem. Yes, you're fulfilling your duties of bringing a korban, but you're not reaching the ultimate reason of a korban. It's not the ultimate level of korban Hashem. A beautiful pshat here in the Nesivos Shalom. What Hashem really wants from you is to be mevatel yourself and to think as you are sacrificing this behema, as you are bringing this korban, that really you're actually being makriv yourself and you're giving it up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's for that reason that the avodas ha-karbonos, the avodah that is done with the karbonos, is one of the three things that the world stands. We say al shleisha devarim ha'olam oimed. The world stands on three things: al ha-Torah, val ha-avodah, v'al gemilus chasadim. And one of the things, avodah, we know is avodas ha-karbonos. Today, it is replaced by tefillah, and we'll speak about that a little bit at the end of the shir. But the bottom line is that this is one of the three pillars that hold up the world. And what's so great about this that holds up the world? Because with this, we're actually doing the tachlis of the world, where the purpose of the world is a person to understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is and what He is. That we're giving up ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what a korban represents. The same way the world stands on Torah, and without Torah, there would be no world, and without a person learning Torah, you really have no life. The world also stands the same way it stands on Torah, it stands on Avodah too. And the Avodah is giving oneself over totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you understand that when you give yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that has the power to get a person a kapara for his sins, for something that you do, that person may have done wrong. See, Shalom brings down Rabbeinu Yoina in his Sefer Sharei or Avodah. He speaks at length about, and he explains what it is that the slaughtering of an animal, of bringing a korban, what it really needs to be. What does it represent, and what does it have to mean to a person? And says Rabbeinu Yoina that it needs to be, as we said, like a person is actually understanding that they would bring their self as a korban. We're saying that if that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, Hashem happened to say to bring an animal instead. But if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever Hashem would tell us to do, even if He would tell us to sacrifice ourselves, that's essentially what we're saying. And that's the way of the avodah of the Karbonos, says Rabbeinu Yoina, that we would bring our nefesh, and what a person is actually doing. And he goes through the whole thing, and he says a person is bringing his nefesh, and the kohen is like a malach hashores, who is bringing the nefesh of a person on the mizbeach. And the animals just represent what's actually going on behind the scenes. But the kohen is like a malach hashores, who brings the nefesh of a person to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Nesivos Shalom brings from the Tiferes Shloima very, very interesting point on a pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk in Yeshaya says, and Yeshaya Hanavi tells us that when Klal Yisrael was doing Averos, the Navi says, Lama li roiv zivchechem yomer Hashem. Hashem says to Klal Yisrael, you're doing Averos. Why? I need your karbonos. Why are you bringing karbonos? The pasuk continues, v'dam parim u'kevasim v'atudim loy chafatzti. It's not what I want. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, what I want is you to do mitzvahs. I want you to be faithful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when Klal Yisrael was doing Averos, the Navi tells us that Hashem Kaviyachol is saying, why do I need your karbonos? I don't need those animals. I need you to serve me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. And if you're not doing, if they're doing Averos, Hashem is not really interested in your karbonos. That's not what Hashem needs. So the question is, Why do we only say this? Why is the Navi bring out the point by saying Hashem tells us, if we do Averos, I don't want your kabbanas. Why not other mitzvahs? Why doesn't Hashem say, I don't want you to do matzah, I don't want you to do sukkah, I don't need any of your mitzvahs. I need you to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're doing Averos. Why does the Navi, why are we picking out karbanos? We also find something very interesting by karbanos, that a machshava, a thought that shouldn't be, a thought can disqualify the carbon. Unlike by other mitzvahs, where if a person does it, l'shem shamayim, even if you have in mind to have a benefit from the mitzvah, the gashmias of the mitzvah. Let's say a person does a mitzvah and he has in mind, there's a bracha in the Torah, v'nosati gishmeichem b'itam, I'll give you parnasa, I'll give you everything. So we don't say that if a person has in mind that he wants some reward for the mitzvah, that you're not yoytz to the mitzvah is possible. We don't say that. Only by karbanos, you have a machshava that doesn't belong with the carbon is no good. Why only that? By Torah too, even, we say, mitad shalai lishma, ba lishma. If a person's learning Torah, and it's not completely for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say, you know what, just learn. You just learn. Because eventually, mitad shalai lishma, if a person learns Torah, and even if you're doing it for not all the right reasons, but eventually you're going to get there. Mitad shalai lishma, ba lishma. Yet, by a carbon we see, no, machshava makes it puzzle. Why is the carbon different? The answer, says in Nesivos Shalom, is that by a carbon, the entire point of the carbon is to give yourself over totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Complete. It has to be a complete giving over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no such thing as giving over yourself halfway. So if you think of anything else when you're bringing a carbon, you have a machshava that's a machshava zara, a machshava that's not part of the avodah of the karbonas, you're defeating the entire purpose. You're missing the point of the carbon. So the Navi, when the Navi Yeshaya reprimands Klal Yisrael, he reprimands them about the karbonos. He reprimands them and tells them that a carbon has to be completely on a high level. And so too, Klal Yisrael, you have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avodas Hashem needs to be complete. It needs to be totally devoted and totally focused on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just like a carbon, we need to give ourselves totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to understand what our job is in this world, what we're doing in this world, how precarious life really is, how every moment that we're alive, every moment that we do anything in our lives, anything that we have is a chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The focus has to be on Hashem. And I venture to say that if that's the way it is by the avodah of the karbanos, today we have to keep in mind that what replaced of the three pillars of the world, Torah, avodah, gemilas chasadim, today it's tefillah. And if it's tefillah, it means that tefillah has to represent and unfortunately replace karbanos today. And what we have to do is understand that when we're davening, it's not just doing it by rote. It's not running in, seeing which is the fastest minion we could get, which is the fastest way in and out of shul. The idea is, if the idea of the karbanos was to give yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every ounce of yourself, then that's really what you're supposed to be doing by davening too. That is the lesson that we have to learn from the karbanos. It's a pillar that the world stands on. If the world is standing on that pillar, we have to do it right. We have to understand that the focus is carbon. The focus is hakrava, which also the world is related, his karvus, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to bring us closer. And just like the karbanos brought us closer, so too our davening should bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this week, we have a special Shabbos, we have Parshat Zachor, we're coming up to a week of Purim. Tefillah could do so much. Tefillah can accomplish so much, but it accomplishes only if we understand what we have to do when we daven. Let's use this time correctly. Let's use this time of the year. Now, Purim and Pesach, we can come so close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's use it as a time to daven. Klal Yisrael needs so much. The world needs so much. What's going on in the world today, nobody understands. at least we should be able to daven and ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for His chesed, that Klal Yisrael should come through, and we should all have chizuk. And I wish you, hopefully we're going to, Mir Hashem, have a shir before Purim. We'll keep you updated as far as which day of the week we're going to have a shir next week.